Rounding out Season 7, we've got to take a look at the new support tier list, which while not receiving a lot of changes in the patch notes, has definitely been swapped up because of Sombra's resurgence. When Sombra's not in the meta and more static comps are in control, it's a lot easier to get greedy with your support line, playing a bit more glass cannon style since everyone's spamming anyway. But with Sombra, and by consequence a lot faster and dive heavy setups coming back into the game, you've got to have supports ready to handle the pressure. Make sure to use the link in the description below for a GameLeap membership if you want to polish up your supports for this season. With all the courses and guides, you can master your favorite heroes and roles with content from a wide variety of experts and coaches. Make sure to check it out and enjoy the video. In F tier, Zenyatta has dropped down deep, being objectively the most vulnerable into Sombra, with no defensive cooldowns and a hitbox the size and shape of the broadside of a barn. Sombra's virus also helps her do more maximum damage to him than before, and since it's really easy to hit on him, you'll be one-shot far more often, making it a pretty big hassle to stay alive. Zenyatta doesn't even have the tools to chase down the Sombra after her new Translocator escape, which is her one new weakness that can be exploited if you manage to survive the engage. Outside of Sombra, he can still get a lot of things done, but his Transcendence really isn't the best in more spammy comps, since it's really hard to time the healing for the right moment since every poke phase has a chance to get an instant pick. Even though Zenyatta hasn't been good for a while, he was still playable in some spam mirrors, but now it's definitely way too hard to pull off. He's pretty much still stuck in Circuit Royale jail, but with Sombra being good into Sigma and Ranked, it might even be tough to play him there as well. One step up to D tier, we've got another vulnerable hero to Sombra. She's unfortunately really bringing some of the already mid-level supports way down. It's Mercy, who similarly can get caught out often by Sombra's hack and the subsequent dive, but at least has some more mobility options and can help her DPS win the game before she gets blown up. Since Sombra isn't in every game, there's still times where Mercy can get a lot of value, but just the damage boost, which has been nerfed at 25%, usually isn't worth it, since a lot of the stronger supports can deal out just as much damage as DPS if they're really focusing on it. She's still a good hero to duel with, to focus your efforts on boosting one player's output, but with faster compositions that can mitigate more damage, the damage boost usually just isn't worth it, and even the resurrection is pretty hard to get off. She already wasn't played that much in the actual hard spam meta, so it's pretty unlikely that she'll be taking off now with Sombra back in the mix, but on some maps, you could combine these two worst heroes, Zenyatta and Mercy, to make the greediest composition imaginable. You'll have to delete the enemy before they have a chance to set up, but you'll definitely have to go fast, since your supports are always on a death timer with this composition. Another step up to C tier, Moira has made a big hop up, with her resistance to dive heroes being a lot more valuable when the hacks start flying. Her Coalescence buff a while back, which allows her to use her Fade while channeling her ultimate, is also perfect to dodge Sombra's hack or EMP, not needing to wait for it to come out before taking the initiative. Moira still doesn't have the utility needed to keep up with the rest of the aggressive meta, but she definitely has the healing and survivability for it. She's got pretty good synergy with Ramatra, being able to pump enough aggressive healing into him to keep him punching without being forced to block in his Nemesis form, and his unblockable punches and her unblockable Coalescence are a great combo for straight up running in to fight the backline at the push of a button. She's still really difficult to place higher up in the list, since she's still just barely equal to other heroes in Brawl compositions, and much worse outside of them. It's definitely worth mentioning that she doesn't struggle at all into Sombra, so she's got at least that to be happy about. Ironically, one spot higher up in C tier is Lucio, who actually does have a pretty bad matchup into Sombra face to face, but with his flexible mobility, he's able to work around it, just like he can to his other counters, and get away with helping his team in a big way. Sound Barrier is also way more likely to counter EMP with its lower damage, and you can even use it aggressively way more often, and not even starting now, but since the beginning of Overwatch 2, where Sombra no longer deletes all the shield health in her effective area. Lucio getting hacked is a pretty big death sentence, but he's got his speed and boob to cancel it, as well as being able to pump the gas to push before he even gets into danger from a Sombra setup. Sombra can definitely be left in the dust if you manage to disengage from her, since she no longer can reset back to her team and help them from main, having to wait for her passive stealth to kick in then slowly trot back to the fight after you've pushed your team early on instead. Maps like King's Row and even Colosseo at times are great for this, with sharp corners that benefit from aggressive and decisive pushes, which Lucio is a true master at. Lucio does need more teamwork to make him more successful, but he's still the ultimate speedster, unlocking a whole new type of composition that when played correctly can dominate ranked games easily. Now for B tier, who's got the finally completed Lifeweaver, who's also pretty resistant to getting dived, and when one of his teammates is getting focused down to a dive, especially when a hack is involved, it's super easy for him to identify it and grab them out of danger. It's difficult to lock him down because of his platform, and while it can be hacked, it definitely feels like a waste of time to focus it. His ultimate is luckily already fortified against Sombra's EMP, only losing 30% of its health just like the heroes caught inside it, instead of being completely deleted. And not only that, but the damage that the EMP does to your team is almost immediately healed up, and with the overhealth as well, the Tree of Life basically gives your team complete immunity to EMP for the entire 15 seconds of its duration, making it really clutch in overtime fights. Lifeweaver may only have the single save and his life grip, but it's an effective one, and his healing range isn't really that noticeable, but 30 meters is more than enough to stay safe and spam out effective healing. He's also pretty easy to get into, and while his hitbox is big and basically loses every 1v1 that he commits to instead of escapes, his extra shield health and healing allow him to stay alive to keep his teammates up and build his ultimate often, a pretty key strength to have for every support. One step higher in B tier is Ana, who's always got a spot reserved when the meta gets more dive based, and especially so with Sombra, focusing on impactful debuffs that you can apply to the enemy to focus them down easily. Ana's self-defense was nerfed a few patches ago, with her biotic nade healing nerfed to 60, but it's still a good defensive tool combined with any friendly support keeping an eye on her. But the real focus is always going to be on aggressive anti-heals, so even if she gets focused afterwards, an effective nade is really difficult to handle. She can sometimes be a target herself, but her sleep dart is technically even better against Sombra now, since there's an extra quarter of a second window when the Sombra wakes up before she actually teleports out of the area. And even so, it's much easier to punish when you can see where her translocator is flying away. And it goes without saying that Sombra is still best played in dive comps with Winston and Ana, where Ana helps the Winston and the Winston helps the Sombra, for a bit of a friend type synergy. She's a fun, effective, and flexible support that is always going to be good, and this season is no exception. To start off A tier, we definitely have to have someone who not only can survive Sombra, but counter her as well. And without spending all my time talking about Sombra, since she's not the only good hero this season, Kiriko can also help her team in a lot of different ways, all culminating in a super aggressive support ultimate that is still basically impossible to kite. Kiriko's headshot damage in Suzu allows her to kill divers like Sombra and Tracer directly, as well as save teammates from their engages, making her great in a more fast-paced meta. While she's not the greatest to put a big dent in spammier comps that have more tank pressure and simply outpace her, she always has the option of playing the flank, opening the fight up beyond just both teams spamming each other in main. Her healing is still a fine way to keep your team up, but not the best for clutch heals with their slow travel time, so as long as you spend your time between the flank and healing your team, Kiriko is a great pick this season, and can even allow you to personally take the game in control with well-timed off angles with some nice headshots. Next up is the previous King Baptiste, and he is still really good. And that feels like an understatement because he truly is really insane. Some of the best survivability in the game, and effective damage, and also a simple and easy way to heal his allies helps him do a lot of things at once, with a crazy ultimate to boot. But he does get knocked down a bit by Sombra, who can deactivate all of that with one button, and with his relatively bigger hitbox, get picks on him all alone. And with a teammate, it's all but confirmed. Tanks like Ramatra and even Winston will see more play with Sombra, and even more so in higher ranks, and they have ways to both kill Baptiste and his immortality field at the same time, but also keep him locked down with Ramatra's Ravenous Vortex or Winston's Jump Back Boop. Spam comps and brawl comps are still strong, and because he can be played in both, he's still one of the more flexible supports to keep your whole team alive forever, despite being engaged often. But with more heroes being able to pressure him, he can't be S tier anymore, since he's not the most invulnerable support around. As for the more invulnerable supports, S tier starts with Brigitte, and her new buff doesn't hurt either. Whenever Sombra's back in the meta, you can bet that Brig will follow to keep her and her cronies in line. And it's actually pretty useful for Brig that her new buff doesn't improve her already strong defensive capabilities, but instead helps her burst down targets easier. With the extra 10 damage on her whip shot, she can actually one-shot any 200 HP targets with 2 swings, a shield bash, and a whip shot. They can be combined in any order, but best used with the whip shot as a finisher. Pretty crazy that she can just do this now, so make sure to not get caught off guard by a Brig jumping you in a dark alleyway at night. As for her rally, it's still pretty strong and is definitely much better at handling EMP with the nerfs to his damage. And in last season, she was definitely a top sleeper pick to keep your team alive against any dive heroes while still having options to get closer to the spam teams. Sigma and Brigitte also have great synergy to cover each other's weaknesses. The funny Sig-Brig duo is definitely a strong option, and across all ranks too. And finally, with Baptiste down a peg being a bit weaker to Sombra, Iliadi is now at the top, all in spite of the nerfs she received to her secondary fire healing. Her simple yet effective kit, along with the extra time for players to get used to her strengths and weaknesses, make her super strong both for keeping your team alive and playing insane off angles that can really carry the entire game. I recently got to play against Skyreaper, ex-London Spitfire flex support who terrorized my Gibraltar game by constantly flanking. It's a hero that has a pretty high skill ceiling, but in low ranks you can still pull off some pretty great miracles, both by saving her allies with her still strong burst healing and making it pretty difficult to pull off good dives against her pylon, which has to be killed first to get started. Her captive sun may be counterable, but it's pretty easy to get it off, being patient against Sigma and Orisa players and quick to pull the trigger against Sombra. Against both, well, you're gonna have to go for some less insane ultimates, but with Iliadi's neutral being so strong, literally making some damage heroes obsolete on her own, she's definitely a meta-defining hero, who single-handedly brought spam comps back into relevancy. Most support heroes have strengths and weaknesses that balance them out to make them not amazing in every situation, but Iliadi is pretty clearly a difficult hero to counter, making her the clear top pick for this season. Thanks for watching, and leave a comment below if you have different opinions on this list or if you're a struggling Zenyatta main seeking support. But that's it for now, so see you next time.